Good morning and welcome to this WIOA Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's topic is the collaborative career pathway approach and integrating LMI effectively in our service approach. Just a quick reminder and some housekeeping things before we get started with our presenters for today. All participants on the call are in listen-only mode. If you have questions as the webinar proceeds, please post your question in the text box. This text box might be labeled different things depending on where you're joining us from today. If you're on your phone, a computer, a laptop, the box might be labeled question box, comment box, or chat box. But it's just a text box that you can communicate to myself and the presenters through and type in any questions, comments, or concerns throughout the webinar, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end of the webinar. Just another note that this webinar will be recorded. The presentation recording and the PowerPoint slides for today will be available on the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support's website, as well as the Illinois WorkNet website within 48 hours of today's webinar. The presentation slides are also in the handout dropdown if you would like to download them for today and follow along with the presentation. Tomorrow, each attendee will receive a follow-up email which will include a survey asking you about today's webinar. If you could please take 5 minutes of your time to provide us with feedback and suggestions, it will really help us improve upcoming webinars. And I'm also going to put that survey link in the chat for everyone if you would like to go ahead and take it throughout today's webinar or towards the end of today's webinar, maybe when we're doing the Q&A, and we appreciate all feedback. Another reminder, if you have a faulty internet connection or you're experiencing faulty audio and you would prefer to call in, you can do so by using your cell phone or telephone. And that phone number I posted in the chat box. It's also in your initial registration email as well. And with that, we're going to get started with a couple beginning polls that we start all of our WIOA Wednesday webinars off with. First, we just like to ask our attendees which partner they best represent. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll now. So we asked just which partner do you best represent, and we do apologize. We know there's other titles that might be joining us today, but if you could answer this quickly, and then if you want to be more specific about where you're, which partner you best represent, you can type that in the chat box for us. I'm going to give everyone about 5 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to share the results with us so we can kind of get a feel for who's joining us today. We have a lot from Title I, which is great, and about 21% from other WIOA partners and stakeholders, and a little bit from our other partners, Title II and Title III as well, which is great. Thank you for joining us today. And then we have one more quick little poll before I hand it over to our presenters. We'd like to know where you're joining us from today. Where's your local area? If you'd like to be more specific, again, you can type that in the chat box. I see we have someone joining us from Mundelein. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Illinois, which is great. Welcome. And we have someone joining us from the Education for Employment system. Welcome. And OSO LWIA 6. Welcome. We have someone from Palatine, Illinois as well. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We have someone from Lisle, Illinois WorkNet DuPage. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly either, so I do apologize, but welcome. Region 3, welcome. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll now and share the results. So we have quite a few people joining us from up north today, which is great, and some from central and southern as well. So we appreciate those polls and you participating in them. for us today. It helps us kind of gather moving forward who our audience is. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our presenters for today, Brian Ingram and Jeff Hughes.
Thank you, Kirsten. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our training around career pathways and labor market information. My name is Brian Ingram, and I work for the National Disability Institute on their WINTAC team. The WINTAC team provides technical assistance to vocational rehabilitation agencies around the WIOA legislation. And my area of expertise is career pathways. Formerly, I have worked for the Title I system quite a bit, and I was both a DPN navigator and also worked around technical assistance for the DEI program, both of these in Oregon and also for NDI. So I'm really happy to be with you here today, and I would like to turn it over to Jeff to introduce himself. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Brian. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Hughes. I am just east of you in Indianapolis. Actually, if you can go ahead and go to the next slide, you'll be able to get a look at our faces real fast. So as Brian said, he worked for WINTAC under the National Disability Institute. I also work with WINTAC. My focus is actually on labor market information. For working with WINTAC, working with vocational rehabilitation agencies across the United States. One thing I will kind of give you the caveat is that normally when we do this presentation live, there's some singing and dancing, interpretive dance, one fateful afternoon in San Antonio, but we're not going to have the opportunity to do a lot of the hands-on activities we typically like to do when we're talking about these kinds of things. So I just want to kind of give you that little caveat about what we'll be looking at today. I'm here in Indiana, and I actually worked for vocational rehabilitation for quite a few years. Left about 6 years ago, and I now work still with vocational rehab, but on the vendor side, I do some. My company does things with self-employment, home modifications, labor market reviews. And other kind of niche products here in Indiana, and then we do things nationally with WINTAC as well. So Brian and I both have quite a bit of experience within the industry, and really starting kind of on different ends of it. And then we're bringing that information together here to present to you today. So Brian.
Absolutely, thank you, Jeff. And if you could advance the slide, that's great. Thank you, Kirsten. Okay, well, what do you say we get started? Career pathways, what is it, and how does labor market information fit into the picture? So to begin with, why don't we define career pathways, which is the connection and coordination of education, training, and support strategies, as the joint labor and education statement on the slide here states. But this slide also introduces another idea that's pretty important to career pathways as well. A career pathways focus will give a client an industry relevant certification that leads to placement certainly, but it also positions the client to advance to higher levels of future education and employment in that area. So this statement's referring to a path, right? A career pathway system needs to have an identified career path within it, like CNA to LPN, to use an example most people are familiar with. It's the idea that the workforce system is not just there to help our clients identify and find a job. I mean, we'll certainly do that, but it's also about connecting a client to a system that has the potential to take them beyond an initial outcome. This is a concept that we're going to refer to as career progression, and we're going to talk a lot about it in this presentation, especially when we talk about career pathways at the individual level. So I'm a big fan of the visual representation, and on the next slide we have one. So let's move to the next slide and take a look at what's going on in the career pathways system. So on this slide, I'm going to introduce you to the 6 key elements of career pathways that both describe and define what a career pathway system is supposed to be up to. It's a circular flow that represents an ongoing process in which the partners identified in the state's WIOA plan participate in a series of actions that establish and maintain a career pathway system under WIOA. So let's take a look. We begin with build cross-agency partnerships. And, that's mostly at a systems level, and it's contained in a state's WIOA plan. The partners get together, the partners named in your plan, and they consider building this career pathway system. So it starts from the top. The next step is to identify industry sectors and engage employers. So once the players have been identified, on the service side, you have to think about the industry side. So what industries are in demand? What industries have labor market needs that could be filled by the workforce system? Once these things have been identified using labor market information, you're going to reach out to these industries and businesses, and you're going to bring them into the group. At that point, you're going to design education and training programs. And these education and training programs are going to do 2 main things. First of all, they're going to meet the needs of the targeted high growth industries that you have identified and that you're currently partnering with. And they're going to meet these needs as they are defined by the industry. So they're going to be focused on certifications, on skills, on experiences that are relevant to those in-demand industries. Secondly, they're going to be designed to be accessible to the job seekers that are using the workforce system. So job seekers use the workforce system generally because they are challenged in finding employment. This is understood in the Career Pathways model, and part of what the partners do is try to address these challenges so that job seekers can access the trainings that are being designed. The next step is to identify funding needs and resources and sources. So each one of the partners engaged in this has resources and has a funding stream. How do we coordinate these? How do we get the most for our money? How do we use these to design customized trainings that are going to meet the needs of these industries? The next step is to align policies and programs. This is much easier under WIOA than it ever was before, right? But it makes sense. The partners have to feed this pipeline they're creating, and in order to do that, they have to be on the same page. They have to make a single approach, ideally, to these industries and these sectors, and they have to work together to meet the needs of both the businesses and industries and the job seekers that they're serving. The next step is to measure the system change and performance. And of course, you want to take a look at how you're doing. Are you getting these job seekers through these trainings? Are these trainings doing what you thought they would? Are they leading to placement? Are they leading to subsequent placements? More than one placement. Are they putting people on career paths? We'll talk more about this later as well. But the WIOA partners need to get together and figure out a way to measure their progress and their performance and to continually improve it. Finally, we're back at build cross-agency partnerships. So you take the information you learned by looking at what you had done and you incorporate it into the partnerships and you start the whole thing over. It's great about a circular chart, right? Okay, so Career Pathways in a lot of ways is kind of a new way of doing business because it creates the framework for existing education and workforce services to move from disconnection to integration into one system. It's one of the vehicles in WIOA that is meant to bind the partners together, to help them to create a single system where all the partners are a part and contributing to it. It shifts focus from job attainment to career for economic success. And we're going to talk a lot more about this. I know Jeff is, but it's that perspective shift. We're moving away from looking at placement as the end all be all to thinking about putting people on career paths that really hold the potential for economic independence over time, and looking for ways to meet people where they're at. Because we know that people don't come to the workforce system usually unless they're challenged in some way, right? Unless they're having trouble doing it on their own. So how do we coordinate our services on the client end to allow them to access what we're trying to set up on the systems end? It transforms the role of employers from a customer to a partner and a co-leader and co-investment in development of the workforce. So business and industry is a player that contributes directly to the creation of this system. They define what's relevant around training and around outcomes, and they prove the effectiveness of the system by hiring the folks that come through it. So it really does engage them in a new and in a deeper way. It provides opportunities for more flexible education and training. And again, this is both about being able to marshal multiple supports around clients as they access training. And also, it's about designing trainings generally to be more accessible to the clients we're serving. And we have the opportunity to do both using a career pathways framework. Finally, it offers a more efficient and customer-centered approach to workforce development. Again, customized approach, meeting these clients where they're at and moving them forward on career paths. Okay, if we could advance the slide. Okay, so what's a career pathway system and what's it mean to you? Well, this is exactly what Jeff and I want to think about with you right now, because career pathways is a model defined by WIOA, has impacts at both the systems and the client level. All right, let's take a look. If you could advance the slide again, Kirsten, thank you. Okay, so here's the definition of career pathways under WIOA, part of it anyway, A through C. So it aligns with the skilled needs of industries, and we talked a little bit about this. It hopes to identify the in-demand industries in your area, region, or state, and develop training programs that align with their needs in the hopes that you can put folks on career paths. It prepares the individual to be successful in any of a full range of secondary or post-secondary education options, including apprenticeships, which we will talk a little bit more about later. So,
hey, Brian, it's
yes.
Jeff real fast. If they can bop the PowerPoint back one slide. Looks like we went one slide
I'm
too
sorry.
far. There you go. All right, continue.
All right. So and I think the important part of B here is the fact that all options are considered for each client. Each client won't need all options, right? But no option is off the table. We don't exclude folks from consideration for anything based on their work history or their barriers or the challenges we see. We think about what makes sense for them in a career with a career focus, and we deal with it. It includes counseling, C, to support an individual in achieving their education and career goals. And of course, case management is a big part of it, and the resources that the WIOA partners can bring to bear. But not just the resources, but the expertise. Within that workforce system and within the partners that sit at that table, you have expertise around training, you have expertise around support, you often have expertise around disability, you have expertise around housing sometimes. There's a lot of expertise. And being able to bring that expertise and those resources to bear around a client can have a huge impact on that client's ability to move from wherever they are when we find them to that career path that has the potential for economic independence at the end of it. Okay. So Kirsten, if we can advance it one more time to the slide that starts with D. So D includes, as appropriate, education often concurrently and in the same context as workforce preparation. I like to call this bit, whatever it takes. Meaning, when you run into a client or a job seeker that experiences multiple challenges to employment, and I know everybody on this training has run into them. I mean, challenges don't come in single, they come in batches, right? I mean, how many times have you run into a client that said, hey, if I just had a 2-term certification training, I'd be economically independent for the rest of my life. It rarely happens like that, if at all. Folks are coming to you usually because they're either in crisis or close to it. And under this model, the career pathways model, we are encouraged to address multiple challenges simultaneously. So that means you don't do all of your workforce preparation necessarily before you put somebody in training. You don't hold off on doing a work experience necessarily until after a training is completed. All options are on the table all the time, and more than one option can be put into play at a time, depending on what the needs of that client, that job seeker are. So you really want to customize the approach that you take, the supports that you put in place for each client based on what their needs are at the moment. Okay, it organizes education and training and other services to meet the particular needs of an individual in a manner that accelerates the educational and career advancement of the individual to the extent practicable. That's a good word, practicable. But that's pretty much along the same lines, right? Whatever it takes is okay. You can use multiple interventions simultaneously. You can use whatever order of services makes sense for that particular customer. It enables an individual to obtain a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent. This one's kind of a no-brainer. Without a high school diploma or an equivalent, it's pretty hard to receive training, and it's pretty hard to get on a career path. Not impossible, but the basic idea is that if somebody doesn't have that and it's possible to get it, that's something we need to focus on. Finally, it's going to help an individual, advance within a specific occupation or occupational cluster. This is the career path. This is the career progression. We'll talk a lot more about this. In a lot of ways, G indicates that shift in perspective, away from focusing on that initial placement entirely or mainly, into thinking about that initial placement as being part of a larger process, part of a larger plan. All right, so I sense you're a smart bunch, and I'm guessing that you might have noticed that the definition above mixes the system and the individual level activities without making a whole lot of distinction between them. Even though most of the systems level activities are going to involve primarily administrators, right? And most of the client or individual level activities are going to involve counselors or staff working directly with clients. Now, in my experience, this blending of the two levels of activity in descriptions led to a lot of confusion in the field. And it is why we're making such a point to sort it out now. I'm going to encourage you as we move forward to keep this in mind as we think about how to set up, operationalize, and maintain career pathways in your organizations. So now that we've looked a little bit at how a career pathway system is defined, I think there's a bit of a question hanging in the air. At least I kind of feel it. Maybe you can too. All right, I'm just going to blurt this out. Why would my agency want to do this? How does it help? How does it forward our mission? These are good questions. So I'm going to turn you over to my colleague, Jeff, to speak to this on the next slide or two. Jeff, are you ready?
Sure, thanks, Brian. All right, next slide. So what we know is, as Brian was stating, that there are these two different systems, the system level and the staff level, that when we're looking at this program. Go to the next slide. It looks like, I don't know if our slides are different here.
Back one. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Well, I apologize, you guys. There's supposed to be a different slide here. Okay, there we are. Why are we using the career pathways framework? So so now that Brian's looked at, again, what the system looks like, the question is, why should we use it? And I do think it's important to note, and as you are hearing these different things and having us explain what these things look like, one of the important things to remember is that we're already kind of doing this stuff, right? We're doing this stuff in bits and pieces. Workforce, education, vocational rehabilitation, other title members, everybody's doing things. And what we've, and we're doing a lot of these things already, but ultimately part of the purpose of this presentation is to kind of provide, again, the framework around what is this thing called career pathways and how to better work this within our you know, our agencies. And so that's kind of why sometimes you have be thinking that, you know, we've already done this or we're doing this now. But stick with us as we kind of lay out how the roadmap, if you will, to how this looks on a much larger level. All right, so I digress there. Back to the point. Why are we doing this? Why should we use a career pathways framework? Basically, there are 4 reasons that we're going to discuss right here. Reason number 1 is that a career pathway mindset is going to create a self-sustaining future for our participants. And it's particularly going to help those who are entering employment that have low skills or are coming in with disabilities. And as Brian has mentioned a few times, skill gains that are obtained today are going to be usable tomorrow as well. And ultimately, that's one of the big benefits that career pathway modeling is going to be able to give us. Reason number 2, by helping our clients start and satisfying careers, these careers are ultimately able to lead to economic independence. And then we are focused on the client and not the conditions that brought the client to us. So this is where individualization, those kinds of principles comes into play, which then leads to reason number 3. The data supports it. Looking at employment and wage data for those who are achieving post-secondary educational goals, they have better data, they have better outcomes than those who don't obtain these, you know, secondary education going into post-secondary activities. So again, in terms of looking at our clients, looking at the outcomes, having a model that basically says this is the objective, is to get people into high school diplomas and beyond, is important. That's one of our priorities because the data supports it. And then reason number 4, developing career pathway mindset means that ultimately we are focusing on skill gains, credential attainment, employer engagement. Basically, it means we're looking at our common performance measures. So if everybody in our agency and everybody in your agency, all of us are combined looking at these same types of things, we're going to be meeting these requirements set under WIOA and going to be doing it better for our clients at the end. All right, next slide. All right, Brian, I think this is technically back over to you. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is me. All right, now that we've quickly covered the what and the why, we'll focus most of the rest of our talk today on the how. So to operate a career pathway model, as Brian kind of distinctly said earlier, we need to focus on these 2 interlapping areas. So first, we look at it from a systems viewpoint. What does legislation say in your state? how does workforce, education, and other systems leverage these legal authorities in order to work with the businesses, in order to make career pathway modeling a positive influence in our state? And then second, once we're done looking at the systematic approach, what are we doing on the local level? What existing tools and expertise exist in the agency, or that perhaps we would have available through technical assistance? And then how do we use these tools to develop policies, procedures, forms, infrastructure, and other things that are going to help our clients directly? And that's what the rest of this presentation is about, is we're going to be looking at the system side, we're going to be looking at the staffing side, we're going to explain a little bit more about both of those, and then we will wrap it all up together at the end. So Brian, back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. And if you could advance the slide, Kirsten. Let's start by looking at career pathways at the systems level. And I'm going to say a word for the first time, and it's a word I'm going to say a lot of times for the end of this training. Let's talk about leverage, okay? The career pathway system seeks to coordinate services and supports that exist in multiple systems. So education, workforce development, and social systems, in order to provide more effective support to clients as they access career pathways trainings. Now, at a systems level, this means that education, workforce development, and social service agencies confer with industry to identify areas of high growth and then determine what skills are needed to help these industries grow to meet this need. Once these high demand skills have been identified, the systems involved work with industry to develop trainings that address this need. Trainings that the systems can then refer their clients to and work together to ensure that the clients successfully complete. Okay, next slide, please. So under WIOA, partner programs and entities that are jointly responsible for workforce and economic development, educational and other human resource programs are going to collaborate to create a seamless, customer-focused, one-stop service delivery system that integrates service delivery across all the programs and enhances access to the program services. So this is the one-stop center, right? Or the American Job Center. So from a customer service standpoint, the creation of this seamless customer-focused system with integrated service delivery has a lot of implications. The existence of WIOA can make a synergy possible in which all of the partners participating in the system can come together to create a career pathway system that achieves their respective missions and serves the public effectively, that leverages resources and uses them more efficiently, that fosters creativity and teamwork and increases the potential for all of the partners to meet the common performance measures. So cross-agency partnerships under WIOA, I think the way to look at career pathways is an engine that can build cross-agency partnerships for the benefit of all of the partners under WIOA in your state. Okay, you can move to the next slide. And let's look at the identify industry sectors and engage employers at the systems level. So the State Workforce Development Board and your governor they're going to develop a sector strategy to meet the workforce needs of the businesses in your state, as well as the job seekers in your state. The WIOA system is tasked with developing a labor exchange and a career pathway model that's going to be fully inclusive of all current and potential job seekers in a service flow that supports a common pipeline of talent to in-demand business sectors. In other words, at a systems level, WIOA partners, I didn't say that right, I'll try, WIOA partners work together to identify those in-demand industry sectors They reach out to those businesses within those sectors and they identify what their labor market needs are. Then they're going to work together with them to develop trainings and services that meet those needs. But that's not all. Next slide, please. The WIOA partners then coordinate their efforts to ensure that the pipeline being developed is going to be peopled with applicants who have or are obtaining the qualifications and certifications that have been identified by the industries. The partners, you guys, are the interface between the job seekers and the in-demand positions that industry needs filled. The WIOA partners have a lot of tools to help them do this, right? There's, of course, case management, which we're going to talk a bit more about later. But the career pathways model also, and especially, emphasizes work-based learning and apprenticeships as a way to meet a job seeker where they're at and place them on a career path with the potential, as Jeff also was saying, for financial independence, which is what this is all about. So let's take a minute and consider apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are in a lot of ways the epitome of what a career pathway approach is about. And WIOA itself supports the creation and use of them. So WIOA provides clear opportunities to more fully align and integrate apprenticeship strategies into the public workforce system, perhaps as a part of a career pathway strategy, right? WIOA advances the use of apprenticeship as an effective work-based learning approach that builds worker skills and establishes pathways to higher levels of employment and wages. It is the very epitome of this. With an apprenticeship, you're going to check all of the boxes. You're going to give that client the best opportunity to get set up in a career path that has real potential, real future potential to lead to economic independence. WIOA funds can be used in a variety of ways to help job seekers and workers prepare for, enter, and complete apprenticeship programs. Now, this, of course, is true. It's a case management piece that we've been talking about. All the different WIOA partners who are on this training today, you have different areas of expertise and you have resources designed to do different things. If you apply all of these towards these clients that are engaged in apprenticeships, they're going to have a much better chance of successfully completing them. And, you know, I was preparing for this training and I just for a minute thought about the different apprenticeship programs I've seen across the country. And I sort of made a short list because it's kind of amazing how many of these apprenticeship programs exist. So I'm just going to run through them real quick because it's kind of fun. Biomedical equipment technician, butcher, cable slicer, dairy technologist, tool and die maker, veterinary technician, glass eye maker, that's a good one, floral designer, glazier, lab assistant, machinist, engraver, able seaman, chef, child care development specialist, dental assistant. And, you know, this is just the one off the top of my head from my notes over the past year. So it's nowhere even close to a complete list of all the different apprenticeship programs that exist. And I guarantee you in the great state of Illinois, you have a few. So one of the things I think it would be smart to do is investigate. Find out what the apprenticeship programs are in your region or your area. Find out what the eligibility criteria are. Find out who's running them. You know, are they in partnership with whom? And start considering your clients for them. Okay, next slide, please. Design education and training programs at the systems level. So, of course, this slide speaks to the development of training and education programs that both meet the need of industry, but are also accessible to job seekers who experience resource and skill gaps. It's about leveraging the resources and expertise available in the services provided by the WIOA partners to support the job seekers as they receive these trainings and engage in a career path, enter a career path. So using bridge programs, identifying and engaging training partners, working with the training providers around making sure that that client is going to be successful in the training. Partnering with disability services offices within post-secondary institutions. Promoting access through leadership and expanding knowledge on accessibility. Researching and promoting work-based learning opportunities with businesses and industries. This is a big one. For a lot of the job seekers we serve and the clients we serve, a work-based learning experience or an OJT is one of the most effective strategies for moving somebody multiple steps along a career path, making them qualified for positions that training alone might not make them eligible for. So it's something that, you know, should be looked into and you should think about. Providing career services, case management, and comprehensive support services. Well, we do this, right? But it is still vitally important. And I think also the thing to think about is coordination, you know, between partners around these topics, making sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes, making sure that we're not duplicating services, making sure that there's no resource gaps that are going without being addressed. Providing employment assistance and retention services directly or through partner collaboration, and promoting and using the integrated resource team model to maximize consumer success. So the integrated resource team is a strategy for customer level resource coordination that does not require any larger systems agreements. And it's a strategy that both Title I and VR have been having some success with. And it's something that if you're interested in, the integrated resource team model, you definitely can look at. You can ask me for more information and I would be happy to give it. All right, next slide, please. Identify funding needs and resources. Leverage and coordination, guys. They're themes we're going to revisit again and again. This slide's a little bit VR centric, but the principle behind it is pretty sound. When developing funding and using a career pathway system, all sources of funding and services should be considered. So for example, if you are a VR agency, you might want to think about identifying sources of funding available from partnering agencies and related public and private sources, because no one system can do it, right? Develop long-term sustainability plans at the systems level with your state and local partners to include infrastructure cost agreements. Consider how your pre-ETS investment can pay it forward. So how's that stuff you're doing with the youth that are in school? How can that be connected to your efforts in WIOA around career pathways? Is your pre-ETS helping folks to get on a career path, helping to feed into these trainings? Consider how service flow that provides for continuum of services during and beyond VR involvement. And this is true for all the partners. So one of the things about a career path is the hope is that it's going to continue long after we as professionals have exited. So you want to consider those integrated resource teams. If you're a VR agency, you want to look at your Partnership Plus agreements. And you're going to want to really, really look at ongoing supports from other agencies that may have longer or different timelines of services than you do. So even though you yourself might not be able to provide services all the way through somebody's career path, you're helping that client to think about it. So if you're a community college or a Title I program, the names will change on this slide, right? But the idea is going to be the same. You're going to want to think about these things. Think about how the other things you're doing, the other parts of your system can be employed to help somebody get on a career path. Okay, next slide, please. Align policies and programs. Again, coordination and leverage, right? This time at an administrative level. How can we align our policies and procedures support the career pathway systems we're developing. So here's some ideas. You identify state and local policies necessary to implement career pathway systems. You identify and pursue needed reforms in state and local policy once they've been identified. You can implement statutory and administrative procedures that facilitate cross-agency collaboration. So again, once you start embarking on this path, you're going to learn some things. Once you're partnering to support people to access career pathways trainings, and you're partnering around placing people afterwards, procedures may present themselves to you at a systems level that makes sense to implement across the board. This would be an amazing development should it happen. And I think it's something administrators should look for. Participate in a committee under the Workforce Development Board targeted at policy development. Again, we're going to talk about this in the next slide too. Measure, and you want to do quality control and quality improvement all the time. Okay, if we can go to the next slide, which is measure systems change and performance. And I'm starting to feel like a broken record, but once again, it's coordination and alignment, this time around performance. Because of the common performance measures under WIOA, there's an opportunity for the partners to really share information and to track outcomes around career pathways that didn't exist prior to the WIOA legislation being passed. So it gives us an opportunity to define desired system, program, and participant outcomes and share data about them. Identify that data that you need to measure systems, program, and participant outcomes. To implement a process to collect, store, track, share, and analyze data between partners. And design and implement a plan for reporting systems and program outcomes, hopefully based around common performance measures, or that is the obvious place that you can go. All right, with that, we've come full circle, and I'm going to hand the show off to Jeff to talk a little bit about what a career pathways perspective can mean at a staff level. Jeff, are you ready?
I am. Thanks, Brian. All right, next slide, Kirsten. All right, career pathways on the staff level. So we've got 7 slides on this particular topic, so you guys can start the countdown with me here. Stick with me. First and foremost, a career pathway model is going to align the workings of your agencies with the skill needs of the local industry. And in the process of doing that, right, if we're encouraging our clients to look at industries that have growth potential, these industries have positive labor market indicators, right? We're going to be getting feet in the door of these industries. We know about the skills and the credentials that they're needing, within this particular workforce. When we have these things, when we're able to match these things up, we're able then to look at the skills needed in these high demand occupations in our geographic areas, and then compare that over to our client base, compare that with the client's abilities, capabilities, their informed choice, all of those things that we should be looking at, for our clients. And then ultimately, what we're doing is we're counseling our clients with real information, real-time labor market information collected from the local labor market, and we're guiding them into classes or credentialing programs that would assist them. Or I guess we can look directly at other things like work-based learning opportunities, apprenticeships, whatever else is going to be available for those particular clients. So at a staffing level, the very, very first fundamental thing that this is going to do is if we focus on career pathways, we are looking at aligning the skills of that our clients are having with the skills of industry. Within the VR perspective, right, we always talk about informed choice and how it's important that we're making sure that the clients that we're working with, are really, it is their choice. The thing about the labor market, though, is that If you want to be an underwater basket weaver, there just aren't that many of those jobs available. And so part of having an informed choice is being informed, and knowing what the local industry needs are is such an important and critical component of that. All right, next slide, please. All right, now for the second one, on a very basic level, career pathway modeling is preparing our clients for the long term. And that means long-term education, long-term training, these things that are essential to having a successful career. So establishing career pathway programs that use things like apprenticeships, use the career navigation, career navigators, whatever resources are available in our local areas, we want to establish these things to support the goals of our clients. Thus, an integral part of the career pathway model has to be getting our field staff talking with each other. That's one of those things that Brian talked about on an administrative level. You know, we could have MOUs, we can have agency agreements and other kinds of things. But the reality is that if we're all trying to assist our clients, getting us to talk to each other on the ground is ultimately something that is very important to making sure the person has the tools necessary to be successful and the long-term supports to reach their goals. So this is when we talk about the Ticket to Work program, and we talk about integrated resource teams and the CRPs that work, you know, with vocational rehabilitation clients in the community. You know, beyond the people on this call and those within the titles, we have to all be working together if we're going to be preparing our clients to be successful. And so again, focusing on a career pathway model, and if we really do this right, it's going to be forcing us to do that. Next slide. Counseling. All right, counseling, of course, this is a no-brainer for us. Let's go ahead and go to the next. No, I'm kidding. We're just going to actually spend a little bit more time to unpack this here. So one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is that, you know, this is a way of career pathways, and doing career pathway modeling is a new way of doing business. And so we have to think a little bit about the old way of doing business. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I come from a vocational rehabilitation background, and looking at the training that we received, and you know, back when I had first started with the agency, looking at how we were taught to think, we were taught within this thing we would call the medical model, right? Particularly, you know, even within the workforce setting, people come to you and they get to your programs because they have problems, and so we always focused on those problems, right? We focused on the disability and how it limits the person within vocational rehabilitation. And why we still have to do that, because you can't accommodate somebody, right? You can't accommodate problems. You can't help them navigate these things without understanding what they have got going on. We've been challenged under WIOA and even before that, you know, we've been challenged to think differently about all of this stuff. It isn't just about sitting across the desk and telling someone what to do. It's about walking with them towards these various answers, using the data, using the labor market information, using the business engagement activities and the resources we're able to find, and then giving all of this data to the client, making sure they understand it, and then helping them choose what's best. You know, so in order to do that, information is key, but the client counselor relationship is ultimately what we're talking about here. So to provide the good counseling and guidance, we have to know where we are going and ultimately why we're going there. So that's why within the career pathways modeling, we focus on career assessments. We focus on colleges and college information, tutoring and other supports, other kinds of accommodations in order to get them there, resource facilitation, transition planning, and these just the boatload of other things that are now part of our job and part of our daily activities of what we're doing, and part of the things that our agencies have sometimes make us do, right? And the fact is that the reason why is because it's there to really help the clients be able to move forward. And my last kind of point, I guess, on this particular slide in terms of counseling in general is that I think what we've learned is that, you know, our jobs are very complex. All of our jobs are very complex, and we can't do it by ourselves. So ultimately, we should have the system in place that's going to assist us. And that system is the community of WIOA. It's the different groups that are part of this. It's the community counseling, counseling with a capital C, if you will. And that's, I think, what ultimately on a staff level, getting counselors to look at this differently, that we're providing this kind of counseling with the resources available to us from other organizations is key if we're going to make this work. Next slide. All right, so this next slide is going to talk about how we are unsiloing our programs. And interestingly, right, sometimes it's unsiloing. I don't even know if that's a word or not. So we are unsiloing ourselves from ourselves within our own programs, as well as unsiloing ourselves from other programs. So I have a 16-year-old child at home. She's I guess she's not a child anymore, right? She's 16. She actually is now doing school here in Indianapolis, where I'm from. Our school district has gone online only to return to school. But she actually has a job, works at the YMCA as a lifeguard, and she has a boyfriend. Oh my. Yep, all those good things that we have to juggle, and we have to help our children to focus on, right? If those of you that have children understand. So like when we have our own children, we're helping them juggle multiple things. We don't silo those things together, right? You can't learn to manage your life by siloing those different segments within our lives. We have to be able to juggle all of these things if we're going to be successful. So allowing us to focus. So how does this relate back to us? Well, ultimately, we need to be able to focus together on our clients, and we need to look at things holistically. We need to look at their education, their workforce preparation activities, STEM programs, soft skill programs, job coaching, and more. And we need to look at these things and how they all mix together for the clients. And that's the framework that we need to look at. So it's not just about completing one activity and then determining what's next. It's about actually having a plan and then having all of these things combined and seeing it through at the end. All right, next slide, please. All right, as I was talking about my 16-year-old daughter on the last slide, she wants to go to college. She wants to stay in a dorm and do what I would consider to be the traditional college experience, right? Now, one of the things that I find it interesting is that, you know, kids these days, my kid told me, you know, I have to have all of this volunteer experience, and I have to have straight A's, and I have to have a boatload of you know, volunteering and work, and I have to have all of these things if I'm going to get into school. And even now, it's like, now I need to have a great TikTok page is the newest thing, right? So the fact is that there are many reasons why my daughter is going to get into college, not just those particular things, but those things will definitely help her chances, particularly if she's looking to go into an out-of-state school or a specialty institution. But these things are helping accelerate her path to her goal. All of those extra experiences, her schooling, her jobs, her you know, her TikTok page, maybe even, right? All of those things are going to be able to accelerate her being able to get into college and be able to meet her vocational goals at the end of the day and her life goals. So from a career pathway modeling perspective, this basically, it's idea of flexibility within our training and our educational programs. The flexibility to meet the needs and the form choices of our clients. Simultaneously, we're trying to work towards the goal, right? And ultimately, if we look at institutions of higher learning and what they offer, there are other ways and other programs that our clients would benefit from. So this is from an exploratory viewpoint, but also from the stance of accelerating progress towards the goal of what our clients are looking for. And so that's what this particular idea is about, is we're trying to accelerate the client's movement through the programs. Because, you know, they contact us today, they don't want to say, well, yeah, thank you for contacting us today. We're going to be able to help you in about 2 years. You know, people don't want to hear that. And so a career pathway model is about accelerating the assistance that we're able to give. Next slide. Oh, next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So this particular one has to do with labor market information. So we're actually waiting on data for today, right? But it was projected that 65% of jobs basically are going to require a high school diploma or equivalency plus additional training after high school or the equivalency test. So there's always going to be good jobs, right? There's always going to be good jobs that do not require additional training and those kind of things. But the data that we discussed earlier about lifetime wages, unemployment, further support the need for additional training or education. So for clients who do not have a high school diploma, this is a very big barrier, now more than ever. And how our agencies are addressing these situations is important. And we would hope that the goal is for someone capable of attaining a high school diploma or equivalency, that accommodations are available to help them get to that point, and that our programs are helping them move in that direction. So again, that's number 6 of the benefits of the career pathway model. Next slide, please. All right, on the staff level, 7 of 7, we've made it. So back to the example of my own child, right? So what happens? What happens if my 16-year-old decides to go away to college and she changes her mind on what she wants to study, right? Or she has a substantial life change, like we have a death in the family, or she gets pregnant. I don't even want to think about it, but you know what? It could happen. Well, ultimately, is her life going to come to a stop? The answer is no. Her plans are going to change, and as her family and her support, our job is to help her move forward in her life, one way or the other, addressing those plans as they come. And so that then is this final thing about, on the staff level, how we need to be thinking about these things differently. Our clients deserve this same option. They need to be able to take a break if there's a change in their circumstances. That's okay. As a government agency, right? As government agencies, how do we address interruptions in services? That's an important question. And how are we trained in order to, help clients move through those things? What resources are available? All of those are important questions. But within a career pathway model, a true career pathway model, answers to those questions are built in. We look at other occupations that we're able to start as an entry point. We're able to look at, again, perhaps additional training or quicker training options. We're looking at ways to basically deviate from the plan in such a way that we're still moving the client forward to the place where they ultimately want to be. Or are we allowed to change that ultimate destination? Yeah, people change, and that's okay. Ultimately, that's why counseling and guidance is an important role within this. So yes, the client, with our help, if possible, they may need our social support, but from the employment perspective, if we know the labor market information, if we know the data on the goal and the entry and exit points along the way, we could find related professions, we could find related trainings. If we integrate career pathways and labor market information into our jobs, we're able to do this and without having a full stop when something occurs along the way. Next slide. Okay, so as we've been describing these things, you've heard me mention quite a few times about labor market information and the vocational goal. And so I just want to clarify, how does LMI and the career pathways, how do they relate to each other? So bluntly, LMI is data, and how we use data is up to us. We can use it one way, we can use it another, we can use it to uplift the client, we can use it to justify to shut down a client, right? So there's ethical implications to how we use the data. But within the within the career pathway modeling, labor market information is really the direction. It's the impetus. It's the fuel, if you will, that is helping us move down this career path. So what education is required for a particular job goal? What workforce information do we know about this job? Wages, position data, task analysis, those kind of things. What other social service supports are available to assist, right? Now, sometimes, right, like social service supports, right? Well, that isn't LMI related. But the fact of the matter is that if LMI, the labor market information, is not strong, if it's not supportive necessarily of a vocational goal, as Brian mentioned earlier, are there other resources that we could leverage if we're going to help the client still get to the point where they want to go? And the answer is yes, there normally are other things that we could leverage. The fact is that we have to have the coordination in order to do that. And that ultimately is how LMI is able to work within this framework. All right, next slide, please. So if LMI informs how career pathway and counselors are being expected to learn about this stuff, how does this impact counselors? And counselors, again, that's the word within voc rehab that we use. So while we've worked with quite a few around the country, quite a few agencies, quite a few counselors on labor market information and understanding career pathways. And here are some observations. Agencies as a whole, and sometimes individual staff members, depending on their interests, sometimes they're going to take a much greater interest in business engagement. Sometimes it might be a staff member, that's their job, is to do that. Sometimes they don't want to touch it, right? But talking to local employers about their needs, about their hiring processes, strategies for getting a client started in a certain occupation, and other such conversations, it's going to allow our staff to know about skill gaps. It's going to allow us to know about federal and state hiring requirements. Basically, if we're educating ourselves on the role of business and the role of knowledge about the labor market information, the local labor market, we're going to be better prepared to help our clients. I mean, I guess to the point. In some states, formal partnerships are being developed, with different agencies as well, right? With the AJCs, with business outreach, we're having joint services. Also, there's also obviously vocational rehabilitation, but there's also some specialty initiatives with blind agencies. So vocational rehabilitation, blind divisions. You also are going to have business relation groupings with, in some states with CRPs, which are the certified rehabilitation programs, community rehabilitation programs. You're going to have all kinds of these initiatives going on. And ultimately, if you're interested in that, if that's something that you're interested in on your level, talk to your supervisor about that, because this is part of our job now. Again, sometimes we have to catch up with what that really means in the scope of our daily work. Next slide. So the second impact then, that was the first impact, really looking at business engagement, labor market information side. But the second impact is the realization that ultimately we do have this role of being counselors, right, to our clients. But and in a lot of the ways, what we've historically done is we've been case managers, right? We've been facilitating other people's resources. And I'm just going to say this, one of the fundamental jobs of being a counselor, it seems, is that we're filling out paperwork a lot. And we don't really have the chance to provide good counseling and guidance to the clients that sometimes really need it. We're moving people through the system. And so a lot of states, a lot of agencies that I've worked back have gone back to the basics about counseling. And they're really looking at part of the fundamental role of being in this industry and doing what it is that we do is understanding how to leverage our partners and the agencies that we work with so that we're able to make that counseling activity more productive. So how are we using our core partners, our integrated resource teams, Partnership Plus, and Ticket to Work activities, other things like that. That is what we've seen as some agencies are really focused on. And again, if you as a staff member are interested in those kind of things, advocate for that. This is now part of our jobs looking forward. All right, so that's my part. I'm going to turn it back over to Brian, who's going to really get us to the brass tacks and take us to the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, everybody. If you could advance the slide to breaking it down, I think you did, but making sure. We are in the home stretch here, guys, which is good. And all through this presentation, you've heard me refer to things like career pathways focus, career progression, financial independence, but leverage. Let's throw that in there too, huh, Jeff? But what exactly do these things mean to staff in the field? So in this section, I'm going to try to get as operational as possible with these concepts, and then maybe pose some questions to you about them. So if we could advance the slide. To a change in perspective. Okay. So this is the real Megillah here. These are the operational indicators that a shift to a career pathways perspective has taken place. So let's take a look at it. You're using labor market research to identify a career progression, meaning that the client has been introduced to labor market information. They've been placed on a career pathway that they know is a career pathway, that they are aware that the job they're trying to get is in demand and the steps they need to take with your help to get it. They know that if they're successful getting this job, what additional opportunities might present themselves in the future. And beyond that, they may even know what supports they might need to have the best chance to take advantage of these future opportunities and a working knowledge of how to access them. So as you're looking at these bullets, I'm sure you're recognizing things on it, like Jeff was saying earlier, that you're already doing, right? And let's be honest, none of this is rocket science or entirely new to anyone who's involved in vocational case management. The point here is the focus. It's the idea that every client belongs on a career path, no matter where they are when we meet them, that they have a right to this perspective, so to speak, and that we, as their WIOA system, need to be the vehicle that introduces them to these ideas and concepts, that puts them on this path. Because to be honest, guys, if not us, who? So let's look at each of these bullets individually and try to keep that operational focus and see what we see. If you can advance the slide. 2, career progression. So this is a definition of career progression in the sense that we've been discussing it here today. The idea itself is far from revolutionary, right? I know it describes pretty closely what happened to me. I mean, I started off my career, Jeff was talking about his teenage daughter. I'm thinking way back many, many years to when I was just a little bit older than that. And I was getting my first jobs. I mean, and I started off by doing a few entry-level jobs that were low wage, low skill, and I was barely getting by. Until one day I applied for and got a job as an aide in a sheltered workshop that helped people with disabilities work. And you know what? It clicked. I liked it. Turned out I was good at it, and I stuck to it. I did a lot of different jobs in the field. I increased my skills and I broadened my experience until more years later than I'm going to tell you, we find ourselves here, right? And I know that my experience is far from rare. This is how many people enter their career paths. They do it by trial and error with the need to work underlining it all. So what happens to the people we work with? What happens when this natural progression is interfered with or is interrupted by challenges to employment related to disability or poverty or access? I mean, if somebody needs a high level of support just to get an entry-level position, their ability to learn about opportunities in different industries through experience is limited. In some cases, almost non-existent, right? Their ability to try different jobs and work environments like I did until one clicks is just not very likely. That's why a focus on career progression is so vital to the job seekers we serve. If not us, who? If not now, when? A WIOA system has the expertise and resources to intervene on behalf of their clients and get them onto a career path that they would have been very unlikely to uncover themselves. And it's better for everyone involved if they do. It's better for the client, it's better for the partners, and it's better for the communities that we live and work in. Okay, I feel like I'm on a soapbox. I'm going to step down from the soapbox now, and I'm going to move to the next slide. Thanks. Okay, so let's look at an example of a career progression. And it's a very simple, straightforward example. It's pulled from a real VR file somewhere in America. So why don't we go through it together, and then we'll discuss it a little bit more on the next slide. So this is Anna. Anna experiences a learning disability. She had some work history as a hairstylist, and she picked this job because she likes people, and she didn't think college was right for her. After she was let go from the salon where she was working, she got determined eligible for VR. So she entered WIOA services through vocational rehabilitation, and she was connected with a counselor. She was assessed, and after completing the assessments, she met with the counselor to discuss the findings. A career path in the medical industry was identified as a good match in an in-demand field that would play to her strengths and meet her needs over time. A career progression in this field was identified that included entry-level certifications and initial placement in such a position, but also identified a pathway into nursing through LPN and then RPN certification, which could lead to administrative opportunities in this field. Okay, if we could advance the slide. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Now, this is hardly an earth-shattering tale of rehab daring do, right? The text doesn't go into a lot of details about the client's disability or name the services that she needed to get her placement outcome. But if I had to guess, it's going to be something like a learning disability or anxiety, something that your average VR counselor is going to see almost every day. So let's just think for a minute about how a career pathway's focus and the identification of a career progression could impact the clients who might have stories like her. I'd also say that, often in Title I, you see clients very similar to this, right? So it's mentioned that when Anna came in, she didn't think school was right for her. Maybe school wasn't a good experience for her, right? I mean, that's a pretty common experience for people with undiagnosed or accommodated learning disabilities or undiagnosed or untreated mental health conditions. Maybe what she thought was not really that school wasn't right for her, but that it just wasn't possible. Now, if a VR counselor were to work with this client using a career pathways focus, they could investigate that statement with the client. They could give the client information about the things that might be possible for her in the classroom with accommodations, and in the job market with the certification she could obtain if she went back to get training. The counselor could identify the opportunities to progress that the initial certification would give her, like CNA to LPN in this story. At the same time that they're working with her to access the mental health supports or accommodation strategies that she needs to be successful, maybe for the first time in the classroom. The counselor could also make clear that these supports could be provided again if needed through additional trainings in the future should the opportunity arise. The counselor could also be connecting the client to resources and services that could continue to support them through multiple outcomes once the VR file is closed, like benefits advisors if she's on Social Security disability, the college's Office of Disability Services, SSA employment networks, mental health professionals, the other partners under WIOA, Title I, maybe the employment department. These connections could be being made now while she's working with VR. So that's the impact on what I would consider a very average file. Now imagine how much impact this approach could have with a client that experienced more significant or more of such challenges. Okay, if we could advance to the next slide. Okay, we're going to look at implementation strategies that can support career progression. And we're going to break down our story a little bit more. We've distilled it into 4 bullets that kind of sum up what I think is critical in supporting a career progression for clients. They are long-term support strategies, ongoing counselor support, coordination of resources from multiple systems, which could be the IRT strategy, and then a focus on retention. So I have a series of questions I'm going to pose to you that I'm going to hope is going to help us think a little bit more about what we discussed today. And we'll talk a little bit about possible answers too, as well. So let's start with the long-term support strategies. If you could advance the slide. So when thinking about long-term support strategies that are going to successfully support somebody through multiple outcomes, you want to think about whether it includes support to the client around accessing services that are not provided by your agency directly and that could be critical to the client's success. So we were talking about this a little bit: mental health, benefits planning, housing, childcare, transportation, the list goes on, right? Are you connecting your client to these resources? Are you supporting them as they access these resources? Resource coordination is a big part of career pathways on the staff end. And so that's something to think about. Does it include advocacy and support to the client around resource coordination? Again, like integrated resource team facilitation, assistance in developing an accommodation strategy. Integrated resource team is a very interesting strategy, and I think you guys might want to think about it, or if you're familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, we can help you to look into it. But using some form of client level resource coordination is critical. Are you thinking about helping your client to obtain resources that they can use post your plan and that are going to help them to move to self-sufficiency? So certificates, OJCs, referrals to ENs, et cetera, if you're, it's OVR focused, but referrals to partners. Have you laid out for your client a full career path, even if your part of it is only one part? Have you worked with them? Have you coached them? Have you made it known to them, not just where the jobs are, but where the supports are to help them get it. Okay, let's move on to number 2. Ongoing counselor support. So are you meeting the client where they're at and supporting them in developing a long-term outline? Again, these things are a little repetitive because the perspective is pretty singular, really. Are you meeting them where they're at, and no matter where they're at when you find them, are you working with them to develop this career progression, to put them on that career path? Are you identifying resources, strategies, and paths that they can follow to head towards economic self-sufficiency? Are you not just identifying needed supports, but are you advocating for and with the client, with providers and institutions to put such supports in place? I can't tell you how important I think that is. For most people, most of the time, a simple referral, especially if it's a number of simple referrals, right, is not an effective way to connect people to services. People really need support around resource coordination. And it's something I think that as case managers, we should consider part of our job. I remember for years and years, I worked in a one-stop, and I remember there were a lot of counselors there, and they knew a lot about resources. They knew a lot about the resources in our area, and they knew who people could talk to. And I would watch them talking to people that came up to get help, and they needed help with a lot of things. You know, they needed help with housing. They needed help with mental health. They needed help with disability. They needed a lot of help, financial help sometimes. And I would watch these case managers hand out referrals, referral after referral after referral. And in my mind, I kind of made up a rule, which is if it was more than 3 referrals, chances were you would never see that client again. And the reason for that is because each referral is connected to a process. Each referral initiates a whole new thing, a whole new process of eligibility, a whole new planning process, a whole new set of characters. And so one of the things I feel clients need the most help with is resource coordination, is really having somebody in their corner while they're approaching and making themselves eligible to receive services. Okay, finally, by extending planning to include activities post-file closure and working with the client to obtain long-term supports and resources to make those opportunities possible. So a career pathway includes multiple outcomes. Your service plans may not. It may include just an outcome or two. So are you, as a case manager, are you as a counselor, helping your client to understand where they can go next to get support around goals that may arise later for them, opportunities that may arise later? Okay, if we can move to the next slide, please. Coordination of resources from multiple systems. So are you guys aware of training options in your local community? Chances are you are, but that meet the labor market need according to career tech, education, post-secondary opportunities, vocational and technical programs, apprenticeship, employer-based training. How many options do you know of? Because different people can benefit from different strategies. And as we stated earlier, all strategies should be considered for all people. All people may not take advantage of all strategies every time, but everything should be on the table for every person. Have you connected with the training entities themselves to determine their level of ability to provide appropriate access and accommodate your clientele? Now, this sounds like it's about disability, but it might not just be about disability. There are many, many reasons that many clients get excluded from many trainings, right? Maybe a client has a criminal background. Maybe a client had trouble in school and never completed. There are a lot of different reasons that clients can be excluded from trainings. So I guess the point is your agency and are you personally advocating with training providers around their criteria, helping the training provider to understand that the client might actually fit the criteria, but in a way they haven't thought of. And have you identified points of services where career pathways options can be presented and discussed with individual consumers? Have you built it into your process? Are you making sure you're bringing in that labor market information? That you are discussing the concept of a career pathway with them, of a career progression, that you're making it known that you can assist them to get connected with additional resources. You can assist them to think about the future beyond the piece that you're directly involved in. Okay, and finally, let's look at focus on retention real quick, and that'll do it. So we're 1 minute over. I'll try to wrap it up very quickly. Have you evaluated within a career pathways model the best point of exit to minimize client success and attain positive performance outcomes? Okay, so you as an organization, you as a case manager, you as a counselor, with each file, have you thought about the optimum moment for you to exit that person that's going to support them, not just to be successful with what they're doing right now, but that's going to position them for the future? Have you discussed with your partners how co-enrolled individuals may receive follow-up and continued services through their programs at the point of exit? This goes for everybody. One of the great things about WIOA is that we can co-enroll clients and job seekers, and we can all share the outcomes. So are we doing that? Are we co-enrolling people? Just because they're enrolled in VR doesn't mean they can't be enrolled in Title I. Just because they're in Title I doesn't mean that you can't be working with education directly. We're all sharing the same outcomes now. And as long as we're not duplicating the exact same services, we can build very complex, full plans around folks that are going to give them the best shot of completing training and getting into some of these enhanced outcomes. Finally, do you have a process for referral for other needed services? So we talked a little bit about this, and I would say resource coordination even more than referral, because simple referral isn't enough. But are you leaving your clients in good hands when you exit? And so, my friends, that's it. Thank you for hearing us out about career pathways today. And I'm going to scroll through some resources that you can access if you download the PowerPoint or indeed otherwise. And I hope you enjoyed the training. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Brian and Jeff. We unfortunately do not have time for our Q&A today, but you can send in any Q&A questions to Brian and Jeff. Here is their information. You can also feel free to email our center. And we hope you join us for our next webinar starting promptly right now, if you are interested. And the webinar from today will be recorded along with all of our resources on our website as well. Thank you, everyone, and you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.